Hello, I'm Frank Burkard Jr., the owner of Burkard Nurseries in Pasadena. We were established in 1937, and for today's lesson, we're going to be talking about making an indoor garden. Now, there's many factors which you need to know is when you're determining to do an indoor garden, you need to think about what lights requirements the plants you're going to grow. So a lot of times people will go, well, I have this really hot window and the exposure is western exposure. Well, the magnifying glass will be 110, 120 degrees coming through, so you need to be able to use a plant that's going to be able to take some heat. Some of these plants, if you decide to do that, we have several old style plants over here called the jades. These jades will take at a very, very, very hot location. A lot of us would prefer to grow herbs, grow orchids. And if you're going to do that, then what you need to do is consider, again, light requirement, maybe the eastern exposure, or set back so it doesn't come through so hot. Another thing is when you're planting an indoor garden, another thing to determine would be on what type of container you're going to use. If you're going to use a ceramic container such as this, what you'd want to do is to make sure that you do not overwater it. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll actually use a plastic container that would fit inside here as our liner, plant the garden inside this, and then be able to water it in the kitchen sink, move it outside to water it, let it drain a little bit, and put it back in. Reason why is ceramics hold a lot of water, so there's a lot of times you can overwater with your ceramic pots. Other containers that make excellent inside garden containers would be the clay pots. And again, if you're using a clay pot, you're going to have some sort of saucer, preferably plastic or ceramic, something that would look good that will not ruin your antique table or your chair or whatever you're going to put it on. Clays have a tendency of breathing better. Another feature what people will do is they will use baskets for their indoor garden. And so you could do a basket, again using a plastic container set inside, and what you can do is you can use a plastic saucer that's fairly deep, so if you do have to water inside, it will be able to collect the water and not ruin your basket, your furniture. Another thing you want to consider would be like the different potting soils. A lot of us will use the organic potting soils, which they're kind of what we'd almost say fluffy. You'll see they're very soft. It's easy to drain, easier to dry out, but they're still primarily peat moss. You've got sponge rock, you've got probably leaf mold, you have probably some little bit of redwood compost, but it's very easy to aerate. Then what you'll also like to do is, if you're not very good with checking the watering, that's where we have a lot of people that will ask about, how often do I water this? Well, every location's a little bit different. So when you're checking the watering, my method is use your finger. You stick your finger in and it feels like moist, you're going to let it go dry. If it feels dry, stick it a little farther in. Now it's time to water. A lot of people will love these little moisture meters, but you've got to be careful because at $7, $10, $11, these are probably made in China, so they're not as reliable. The gauge will not be as diverse as your finger. So a lot of people just need to think about, this is okay to give you a rough idea, but I'd still use my finger, or get to know how often does your plant dry out. Then there's also like little fun things you can use when you're doing an indoor garden. There's miniature shears to trim it back, like I want to make it a little fuller, so I just cut it back. I want to cut this back here a little bit and make it a little bit fuller. Sometimes what they'll do is, on the jades especially, you can make them into like little miniature bonsais. I'm Frank Burkard, and those are some tips on growing an indoor garden.